Episode 2 just dropped, and it's quieter than I expected. No big speech, no dramatic reveal. It doesn't swing a sword at you, it just looks at you and waits. This episode asks something that sounds harmless at first, almost small, but the longer you sit with it, the more uncomfortable it gets. What if the man who made you meant nothing to the world? Yeah, that's episode 2. The episode opens with Dunk and Egg on the road toward Ashford. They're no longer alone. The road feels busier, marked by tracks and signs that others are heading to the same place. As they reach the tourney grounds, the scale changes. Banners first, then tents, then crowds. Dunk immediately looks out of place, his armor plain, his movements cautious, unsure where he's meant to stand. In the camp, Dunk tries to present himself as a knight. He speaks of Sir Arlan of Pennytree with clear respect, expecting the name to carry weight. Nothing happens, no recognition, no reaction. The conversation simply moves on. Egg notices before Dunk does, watching faces for responses that never come. As the day continues, Dunk drifts between groups, knights preparing, squires boasting, nobles observing from a distance. Every interaction reinforces the same thing. Names matter here, his doesn't. The arrival of the Targaryen princes shifts the space instantly. Baelor Breakspear enters and the camp reorganizes around him without a word. People step aside, conversations stop. Later, Dunk faces a practical problem. His shield. He cannot claim Arlan's blazon without recognized proof, so he's forced to design a new sigil, one that represents only himself. The tourney builds, jousts are announced, crowds gather, a stage play mocks the myths of knighthood. The crowd laughs, Dunk doesn't. Near the end, Baelor briefly acknowledges Arlan in public. It's small, but it's the only validation Dunk receives. The episode closes with Dunk preparing to enter the lists, armed, visible, and uncertain of what he's standing on. The camp never fully relaxes. There's always movement in the background. Even when people are laughing, their eyes keep checking rank. Their attention shifts the moment someone important passes. Dunk stands still a lot, too long enough to feel noticeable, like he's waiting for permission that never comes. Unsure when it's appropriate to move or speak, Egg watches everything, quiet, measuring. He absorbs details Dunk doesn't notice, who gets interrupted, who doesn't. When names are spoken, some land, others fall flat. You can feel which ones matter before anyone reacts. The air changes slightly. There's noise everywhere, metal, voices, hooves. But around Dunk, it often goes strangely quiet, like the world briefly forgets to account for him. No one is cruel, that's the part that hurts. The absence of hostility makes the exclusion feel normal, routine. So here's my quick take. Episode 2 isn't about whether Dunk is good enough. It never really questions his effort or intent. Nothing in the episode suggests he lacks skill, bravery, or even discipline. It's about whether what made him good has any value here at all, whether private virtue survives in a public system where recognition is everything and memory only counts if it's shared. And that's a way colder problem because it doesn't attack him directly. It just removes the ground beneath him, quietly, without confrontation, without even acknowledging that something has been taken away. This is the moment where the show kind of stops being about becoming a knight, not training, not proving oneself, not climbing a ladder, and starts drifting into something colder, something structural, inheritance, who gets to matter, and who decides when a life actually counts. Okay, let's get into it. The core question of this episode isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with conflict or spectacle, and it doesn't rely on a single dramatic scene to make its point. It doesn't announce itself. It waits. It lingers in the background, repeating itself in smaller, quieter ways. It just keeps repeating the same moment in different forms, the same absence, the same missing response. Dunk talks about Arlan. He offers his past openly, without defensiveness, and the world doesn't respond. It doesn't reject the story. It simply lets it fall. Yeah, that silence, that's the clue. Not the words, but what doesn't come back to him. The lack of friction, the lack of reaction, the lack of any need to correct or challenge him. Because this isn't about disrespect. No one mocks Arlan. No one contradicts Dunk. No one challenges his story or calls it a lie. They just don't care. They don't need to. And that's worse, because it tells Dunk his history has no audience here, no function, no role to play in how this world organizes itself. The first real pattern emerges here. In Westeros, violence doesn't always come as an attack. It doesn't always draw blood or leave visible damage. Sometimes it comes as indifference, as being passed over, as not being worth the effort of hostility. Dunk is ignored by people who aren't even trying to be cruel. They aren't villains in this moment, and that's what makes it unsettling. They're just operating inside a system where recognition equals existence, where value is communal, not personal, and where stories only matter if enough people already know them. If no one knows your name, your story doesn't travel, it stays where it started and dies there no matter how true it is. Oh, that's rough. And this keeps repeating, not dramatically, but consistently, like a rule being enforced without ever being spoken at the camp, around the knights, near the nobles. Dunk isn't challenged. No one tests him. No one tries to measure him. He's bypassed, treated as background noise, as someone whose presence doesn't require adjustment, which tells us something important. The episode isn't testing his courage. It assumes that already exists. It's testing his foundation, the thing he believes he's standing on, the story he tells himself about why he belongs here. Because everything Dunk believes about himself comes from Arlan, from memory, from private history, from shared experience that only two people ever fully witnessed. But memory doesn't function as currency here. It has no exchange rate. It can't be traded for legitimacy. Yeah, that's terrifying. This is where the show's intention starts to crystallize. And here's the thing, this isn't a new idea for George R.R. Martin. It's one of his oldest concerns. He's always written characters whose virtue has no audience, whose goodness doesn't translate into power, and sometimes actively works against them. Think Brienne. Think how often her honor isolates her instead of elevating her, how it makes her strange rather than celebrated, visible but never fully accepted. Dunk fits that lineage perfectly. He's competent, sincere, and fundamentally misaligned with the systems around him that decide who counts and who doesn't. The show isn't asking, is he worthy? It's asking, what happens when worth can't be verified? When it can't be witnessed or proven publicly, no matter how real it feels to the person carrying it. That brings us to the blazon. This moment is easy to miss, but it's brutal, because it forces a decision Dunk never prepared for, one that cuts directly through his sense of continuity. Dunk can't carry Arlan's symbol, not because it's false, but because there's no recognized proof it ever mattered to anyone else beyond Dunk himself. So he has to invent himself, on the spot, without a safety net, without a shared past to lean on, visually, publicly, alone. Yeah, that's a lot. This isn't empowerment. It doesn't feel like growth or self-definition. It's exposure, standing without cover, without inherited protection. Now watch what happens when Baelor enters the story. Baelor doesn't save Dunk. He doesn't advocate loudly or intervene dramatically, and he doesn't challenge the system itself. He doesn't elevate him out of kindness. He simply acknowledges Arlan, one sentence, one confirmation, one shared memory entering the public record, and suddenly, Dunk isn't floating anymore. He's anchored, even if just barely, even if only for a moment. One witness is enough to prevent total erasure, and that's terrifying, because it means everything depends on who's watching and who chooses to speak. Here's where the episode quietly twists the knife. Because if identity only exists when witnessed, then honor without recognition is functionally invisible. The tourney reinforces this idea visually and emotionally. The crowd cheers spectacle. They applaud performance. They reward appearance. Dunk watches all of it, realizing something awful. This place doesn't measure what he values. It measures what it can see, and only what it can see. I'll be honest, this part got me. On my first watch, I thought it was just atmosphere, just texture, something meant to establish tone. On rewatch, I felt the displacement, the slow realization setting in, the way the episode closes doors without ever slamming them. That moment where he looks at the crowd, I had to pause, just sit with it, because he's not doubting himself yet, he's doubting the world, and that's a much scarier turn, because it means the problem isn't internal. So the conflict shifts, quietly but decisively. It's no longer, am I good enough? It becomes, what if the thing I respect has no value here? And the episode refuses to answer that. It leaves the question hanging, unresolved, deliberately uncomfortable. Let me leave it here in 5 clean lines. Dunk's identity is built on private memory. Westeros only recognizes public proof. Arlan exists only if someone remembers him. Baelor is the last barrier against erasure, and Dunk is entering a system that may never look back at him. That's not resolved, and it's not supposed to be. So here's the final turn. Episode 2 isn't preparing Dunk for a fight. It's preparing him for invisibility, and the real question isn't whether he'll survive the tourney. It's whether an honest man can survive in a world that only rewards what it can see. So what do you think? Is this the beginning of a tragedy or the foundation of a different kind of hero? Drop your take below. Thanks for watching,